All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the brand new Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And I've recorded more than 5,500 interviews since 2003, almost all on foreign policy, and all available for you at scotthorton.org. You can sign up for the podcast feed there, and the full interview archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. Hey, you guys, check it out. On the line, I've got the great Jim Bovard, author of most books that have ever been published. Welcome back to the show. How you doing, Jim?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
It's a really long list of books. The Farm Fiasco and Freedom in Chains and Feeling Your Pain. Oh, the Fair Trade Fraud. That was a good one there. And then, of course, my favorite is, don't let me forget, The Bush Betrayal. And then my very favorite is Attention Deficit Democracy. But then you had that great memoir, too, which was, god dang, right on the tip of my tongue. Public Policy Hooligan.
Very good.
I love this guy. Hey, man, happy to have you here back on the show. Let's talk about this thing you wrote for the New York Post. Oh, did I mention that Jim is a regular contributor to the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org? That's a fact. Although here you are in the New York Post, inside the FBI's infiltration and entrapment of a Michigan militia crew. And not just that, but inside the jury's acquittal of most of them and hung jury on the rest, and total failure of the federal prosecutors to prove their case, even to a federal jury, which, as we know, those were created by the state in order to rubber stamp convictions on whatever they want. They get 98% conviction rate or better in federal court. I'm rambling. Go ahead and say things. What happened here?
Well, I mean, it was such a bizarre case, and this is something that the FBI. Now, there was it goes back to the start of the pandemic. Governor Gretchen Whitmer was one of the most heavy-handed governors here in the U.S., and she basically, as soon as the pandemic started, she dictated. She basically put everybody in the state under house arrest, and said that anyone who left their home to visit family or friends could be fined $1,000, and business owners faced 3 years in prison for refusing to close their stores. I mean, but it was a very biased set of shutdowns. I mean, there was, people ragged on it because people could not buy gardening supplies there in the spring in Michigan, but people could still buy state lottery tickets. So it was kind of peculiar, but she totally wrecked the Michigan economy. The unemployment soared to 24%, the kind of level they had in the Great Depression. And her policies caused huge anger among people whose jobs were destroyed, whose businesses were destroyed. Some of those folks were very outspoken, yammering like a bunch of, doing a lot of yammering. And then so what happened was some FBI informants came in and started working on some of the people that were already shouting and angry, and persuaded them to join this plot, which was basically contrived by the FBI. And it was a zany idea to kidnap Governor Whitmer from her vacation home and take her someplace else, maybe Lake Michigan, maybe Wisconsin, and put her on trial. So a number of the folks who were charged in this case explicitly said that they did not want to have anything to do with the kidnapping. But the federal informants and the undercover FBI agents, there were about 12 guys charged in this case or fingered in this case, and there were about there were more than that of the informants and the undercover FBI agents. It was set up by the feds from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked with Ken Bensinger, who's done the best journalism.
Oh, he has done great work on this. Excellent work.
And he talked about how at one point, at least, there were more than a dozen informants inside this plot. So now there's so many different aspects to this. I guess, I forget. I read both y'all's articles this morning. I forget which one of you brought up when the Supreme Court redefined entrapment down.
Was that you? That was my New York Post piece.
Right. So talk about that a little bit, because in other words, there's a real question here. There should be a real question in the mind of everyone listening. Were these guys going to hurt the governor and the FBI stopped them or not? I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Yes, this is an issue which I wrote about for Playboy back in the 1990s, and it was back in the early 1900s. The Supreme Court carved out a clear standard for making an entrapment defense. But what happened was that Nixon's favorite Supreme Court Justice, Rehnquist, gutted most of those defenses against government entrapment by focusing almost solely on the subjective disposition of the person who was entrapped. So if prosecutors can find anything in a person's history or in their comments or in their disposition that show that they might have leaned towards that crime, then the person is guilty no matter what the government agents did. There have been a number of cases in which government undercover agents used sex to entrap people to sell drugs or to do other things. And the federal judges have said, well, that's not going too far. So it means that you can't trust a woman, even if she gives you anyhow, I think you get the gist.
Be careful now, Jim. You're going to get us canceled here and demonetized.
Hey, I don't want that to happen. I saw that. I saw your tweet today on your warning from Google. So what a load of crap.
Yeah, well, you better toe the State Department line or no more dollars for you. Although dollars ain't worth what they used to be anyway, so what the hell?
Well, it's all Putin's fault. So,
yeah.
But so the thing that happened is you had the Supreme Court defined entrapment almost out of existence, and because of that, there was an explosion in entrapments. After 9/11, the FBI basically had a terror factory, as Trevor Aronson wrote. But only about 1% of the 500 people who were charged with terrorism offenses in the decade after 9/11 were actually threats. 30 times as many as those people were induced by the FBI to behave in ways that prompted their arrest.
Yeah. And listen, I know that that's true because I kept up with them all along too, and not all 250, 300 of them, but as you attest in your article here, the great Trevor Aronson has in his book, The Terror Factory. He really goes through a litany of these. And I actually had a book proposal once upon a time to do a book like this, although no one would take it. And I didn't know I could just do it myself, really. So I didn't. But people might remember. Do they remember anymore? Liberty City 7, the Fort Dix pizza plot, the JFK Airport, fuel storage depot, the remote control plane attack on the Pentagon, the Christmas lights of Portland, Oregon, the poor kid, Hamid Hayat, out there in Lodi, California, where the FBI informant just infiltrated him and his dad and entrapped this poor, just essentially browbeat this kid into saying something stupid and never even doing anything to anyone. And it just on and on and on it goes. Oh, the poor guys of the synagogue plot in Brooklyn and, all of these things. It's just completely ridiculous entrapments. And then, as Trevor documents, there are 250, 300 like this, where it's just some poor schmuck. Remember the kid they entrapped on the Brooklyn Bridge? They went to the Islamic bookstore, and they found the slowest kid there, which I don't even know what he was doing at the bookstore. Found the dumbest kid there and said, yeah, what you're going to do is you're going to destroy the Brooklyn Bridge. Here's a blowtorch. I don't even know if they had him a real blowtorch. They just had him agree to accept one someday or something.
This is typical of how those plots were hatched. And part of what fascinated me about this case, BuzzFeed's Ken Bensinger did some superb work on talking how the federal judge blocked the defense lawyers from introducing into the evidence at the trial the vast majority of evidence of how the government had set up the case and set up the defendants. Mm-hmm. I mean, for instance, BuzzFeed noted that the judge
hold that thought for just one moment, Jim, so
Sure.
that I can say everyone. It's at BuzzFeed. It's called "A Stunning Surprise in the Michigan Kidnapping Case" by Ken Bensinger, like Ben Singer, and it does have the litany that Jim's about to describe. Go ahead. Very important.
Yeah, there was a quote from that piece noted that the judge ruled that the defendants could not inquire about the past conduct of several FBI agents, though the government would be allowed to question the defendants about episodes in their past. But luckily there was enough there that the jury was able to smell a federal rat. There were some funny details on how this stuff shook out. There was the lead FBI agent who was the so-called face of the entire case against these kidnappers. And there was a wonderful, FBI had trouble with this guy. There was a wonderful phrase in the New York Times that said that that the lead FBI agent was arrested for beating his wife during an argument over an orgy that the two had attended at a hotel in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Mm-hmm. So, orgies in Kalamazoo always work out bad.
Yes.
You simply have got to avoid any orgy.
Especially when you invite a bunch of feds to it,
Well, yeah, no, there's jokes I could make, but I guess you're trying to avoid getting canceled by Google, so I'll shut the hell up.
I don't give a damn. Screw that, man. Go ahead.
So it was a totally, I'm all in favor of the idea of fully informed juries, but what this case illustrated was how the prosecutors working with the judge can rig what juries learn, because there are so many things which are the juries never hear about. And the BuzzFeed story had a superb litany of some of the key witnesses that could have testified, but they were threatened by the feds, so they invoked Fifth Amendment, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And not to sound like Pollyanna over here or anything, but some of those things seem like there must be some kind of precedent against feds just looking at a list of defense witnesses and coming up with things to threaten them about in case they're thinking about testifying for the defense. What the hell is this? The South or something?
Well, it was a fascinating piece in BuzzFeed because it really showed how the game is played for a high profile case like this, where the feds have put all their prestige on the line and the feds want to do anything to win. That nope, muzzle. Mm-hmm. So you only hear about the federal agents, and then you hear the tapes from some of the dumb things that some of the defendants said. I was giving a talk last year to the Maryland LP, Maryland Libertarian Party, mm-hmm. and I was, there were a number of things like this that were percolating, and so I was making the point: if the FBI wants to talk to you, what do? You shut the hell up. You get that FBI 302 form. There's no tape recording of what you said. It's your word against the FBI agent and his memo. You're screwed. So, but there were a lot of dumb things that these plotters said, but they would tend to sit around, smoke a lot of dope, and then run their mouths. And I was telling an editor, part of my perspective on this entire case is I was raised in the mountains of Virginia, and I was used to hearing redneck blather. And, redneck, we're going to do this, we're going to blow that out, well, HM11. Yeah, sleep it off. So, but when you got tape recordings, when you've got all these informants and this, it can look really bad. There was, so that was some of how the case played out.
Yeah, man. It's so funny because this was so obviously a hoax from the beginning, just when you've seen so many of these. But what was important here was the timing. This is October 2020. These are all supposedly a bunch of Trump guys going to kidnap and murder the lady governor, huh?
Yep, and it played out that way. It was there were a number of former FBI agents who spoke up as soon as this case was announced. There was a guy, Frank Figaluzzi on MSNBC, announced that Trump should be investigated for aiding and abetting the Michigan plot. Mm-hmm. There were comments similar. There were comments extreme by Andrew McCabe as well. I don't recall exactly what he said. Governor Whitmer said that Trump that when our leaders meet with and fraternize with domestic terrorists, they are complicit. So this was a storyline at the same time as early voting was going on. I mean, and there were like 80 or 90,000 tweets on the day of the announcement of the arrest that said "Stop Trump Terror." And it got huge play, probably 100 times more than the jury verdicts last week have gotten. And it was during the early voting, and Biden won the early voting in the presidential race. Trump won on the day of the election. Trump's campaign wasn't too bright, but that's another story. But this is, and it was an intentional effort by the FBI, by at least some FBI officials, to, it certainly appears that there was an intentional effort to aid the Biden campaign.
Hang on just one second. Hey guys, I had some wasps in my house, so I shot them to death with my trusty Bug Assault 3.0 model with the improved salt reservoir and bar safety. I don't have a deal with them, but the show does earn a kickback every time you get a Bug Assault or anything else you buy from Amazon.com by way of the link in the right-hand margin on the front page at scotthorton.org. So keep that in mind. And don't worry about the mess. Your wife will clean it up. Green Mill Supercritical is the award-winning leader in cannabis oil extraction. Their machines are absolute top of the line. They simply work better and accomplish more for less than any competitor in the world. We're talking anywhere from a couple of $100,000 for the base model and up. So this is for serious business people here. But the price, as they say, will be worth it. Green Mill Supercritical customers' investments pay for themselves oftentimes in just weeks. Simple enough for almost any operator. Deep enough for master technicians. Their new novel techniques for inline real-time winterization are leaving their competitors in the key. That's greenmillsupercritical.com. Man, I wish I was in school so I could drop out and sign up for Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom instead. Tom has done such a great job on putting together a classical curriculum for everyone from junior high schoolers on up through the postgraduate level. And it's all very reasonably priced. Just make sure you click through from the link in the right margin at scotthorton.org. Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. Real history, real economics, real education. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, at the same time, the CIA was suppressing the Republicans' October surprise against Hunter Biden with a blatant lie that somehow, the FSB planted a laptop at this repair shop? They never even said. They said Russian disinformation, even though it never made any sense whatsoever on the face of it, couldn't possibly really be Russian disinformation. But anyway, they completely buried that story with the CIA. Then on the other hand, the FBI is making up one for the Democrats. And a big one, too. I mean, kidnapping and murdering a lady governor, that's not nothing if it was real. And close enough for government work in this case, right? I mean, that's probably 1% or 2 or 3 across the board, Jim, right?
I don't know how much influence, or I don't know how many votes it swayed, but it certainly added to the narrative that Trump was basically, a total dictator who needed to be taken out of office. So it's interesting with the FBI. This was the second presidential election in a row that they tried to fix. In 2016, Comey was in charge of the investigation of Hillary's emails, and it was such a sham of an investigation that they never talked to Hillary until the last day of the investigation, and the FBI agents went to meet with Hillary and her top lawyers and her aides, and they sat around the table. There was no video recording, there was no audio recording, and FBI agents later admitted that they planned to absolve Hillary Clinton unless she offered a confession. And so this is how the FBI treated someone who had violated numerous federal laws with her email cover-up, with her server in her home that was not secure. This is how they treated a presidential candidate. It was a complete sham of an investigation.
Yep. Well, and they went along with the Democrats' Russiagate hoax from the beginning, too. I mean, they were the primary drivers, even more than John Brennan and Clapper and the intelligence guys. It was the FBI counterintelligence division that was really responsible for Russiagate more than anybody else.
Absolutely. So, it goes back to what Harry Truman said in the 1940s, once he was president. He wrote in his diary, he was worried the FBI is becoming an American Gestapo. Mm-hmm. And it's like, maybe they're not a Gestapo, but they are pulling an awful lot of strings. And to see the deference of most of the media coverage, I mean, you get so many Washington reporters who are just kind of standing outside FBI headquarters, waiting for a handout or some leak, which they can throw in a headline. So the media has just been, in most cases, worse than useless on the FBI.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, they just take anything they say as just absolutely true. In fact, I mean, not just the FBI, but just government itself too. Like, we don't know it's raining until the,
National
National Weather
Service
Service says
confirmed
so. It
Yeah.
seems like it's wet outside. I don't know. But I remember when right at the dawn of the Iraq War II, when the space shuttle exploded over Palestine, Texas, with an Israeli on board, and coincidentally enough, and everybody knew the damn space shuttle blew up, Jim, for like 2.5 hours or something. Of course it blew up. It didn't land on the runway when it was scheduled to land, did it? There's flaming wreckage pouring out of the sky and people like picking it up and holding it in their hands. They're dead. It's over. But the TV and the radio would only say, well, apparently it seems like there may have been some kind of malfunction or this kind of non-committal language until
That's
finally
bizarre.
after lunchtime, W. Bush, the president, confirmed that the space shuttle exploded. Only then would they adapt their language from, geez, apparently, allegedly, seemingly, it might have been, to like, yeah, of course, the damn thing exploded,
Wow.
And that was, that's how you know something is true, is when the president says that it is. And so
Yeah,
that explains everything.
Yeah, it's a very interesting standard because something which happens in some crime or alleged crime cases, there's slow media comments or specifics because there's concern about libel, but it's not a question of libel when it's criticizing the FBI, because the great thing about American libel law is that government agencies cannot sue private citizens. Unlike Britain and some other countries. So I think that's how it works in Britain. I've been wrong before.
Yeah, well, they certainly have an Official Secrets Act that's...
Oh, my God. It's horrible.
Yeah,
it is horrible.
And, we do too, right? I mean, our Espionage Act does go that far in writing. It just hasn't been applied as such until Assange now, that publishers, too, can be indicted and criminally prosecuted, not just leakers, but leakees.
Well, it's interesting how Julian Assange vanished in the in memory hole at the same time. The Washington Post front pages every day is outraged about atrocities in a foreign war. Too bad they didn't care about Assange.
Yeah, no, they don't give a damn about him. It's amazing, and they must know. Like, if anybody understands this, they must know the precedent being set, but they still think they can get away with staying in the government's good graces rather than standing on principle. It's really a disgrace, dude.
Standing on principle. Okay, hell, that's the funniest thing I heard all day.
I wasn't sure if you're laughing about good graces on delay there, or, the government's good graces, because I think they'll turn on any of their own kept little pets anytime too. That's just as laughable.
Well, it's a mess at so many different levels. It's, but the system doesn't have it isn't calibrated to make the self-corrections, because the biggest bootlickers rise to the top.
Yep. Hey, speaking of which, too, this
is a great transition. Okay.
Yeah. Well, back to this judge who excluded the entire defense case here. 2 questions. First of all, how come there's never even any accountability? This guy, at least he got named in Bensinger's piece. I'm not sure if he got named in yours, maybe. But they get no publicity. There's never even a fantasy of a daydream of a question of a possibility of accountability for a corrupt federal judge who makes horrible, horrible rulings, excluding a defense case when it turns out the jury agrees they actually didn't do it anyway. Makes him look to me like a co-conspirator in a false prosecution. In this trumped up entrapment case, he's just a member of the prosecutor's team. But John Oliver's not going to do a special on HBO about how he should be run out of power somehow or some kind of thing. There will be no impeachment hearing for bad behavior by the Senate or what, right? Like he just gets to go on being Judge Robert J. Jonker, right?
Yeah, yes, and I just checked my New York Post piece. The piece did include his name.
Good.
But
damn him.
But it wasn't a situation of the judge being corrupt. He was simply helping the government win.
Oh, that's all. That's his job, after all.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's enough. Now, here's somebody has some interesting comments on Twitter on this. Was saying like, they saw my piece and they were saying, well, I assume there's going to be a big investigation in Washington on this to find out how all this went down. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm on the edge of my chair again on this one. So, yeah, thank you. I wasn't able to do the laugh on cue, so
I got you covered, buddy.
I appreciate that. No, it's just, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I would love to see the internal FBI emails and texts, because there may have been some people in the FBI say, folks, what the hell are we doing here? I mean, this is way over the line. Jonathan Turley had a good column on this a day or so ago, where he said it was a case of entrapment that went far beyond what would be considered reasonable enticement. So, but I don't expect any investigations. It might, there's very little, focused pushback against the FBI. I mean, there's been very little effective investigating the FBI for their abuses in Russiagate or with the Hillary email, so-called investigation. And, the FBI has gotten away with so much, they can always say, hey, it's state secrets, go away.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and, they're not at the top of my sympathy list, but this horrible lady governor and her family probably believed these lies for most of this time, right? Like she's.
I don't know. I mean, it was okay. So there was a story which I did for the American Institute for Economic Research. This is a story which came out on the day after the FBI made the announcement, and the comment, where the hell is my comment on this? It was basically saying that the entire thing sounded like a crock. I mean, there was this crazy stuff about hijacking a Black Hawk helicopter.
I love that part.
I had some really nasty comments about the case where they edited it out. This is from the story which I did in October 2020. I'll send a link to Ed.
Great.
But
yeah, that'll be in the show notes, guys. And no question, I'm sure you were on this at the beginning, and no surprise there whatsoever. But I mean, I think, I don't know about her and her husband, but presumably, like, I don't know, grandparents and nieces and nephews and kids saw this stuff on TV, really had reason to worry that their relation was going to get kidnapped and lynched. That's kind of a big deal. Like, if you're her 10-year-old or whatever, I'm just assuming, I'm making up a thing, but you know what I mean? Like, she must have kids and stuff like that. It was pretty scary,
Well, I mean, I will just mention that she's one of Joe Biden's favorite governors.
Oh, yeah, no question. And as you described there, she was absolutely just a totalitarian monster during the lockdown phase and all that. So like I said, not at the top of my sympathy list, but still, like, kind of extras in the FBI skit that they put on here, right? You know what I mean? With whatever attendant collateral damage still,
Maybe, yeah. I don't know how much of what she knows. Okay, so here was my comment on the day after the FBI made the announcement. This is the day after there were 90,000 tweets. Stop Trump's terror. So I said the alleged Michigan plot is almost too idiotic to believe. The alleged conspirators purportedly planned to kidnap Whitmer, take her to Wisconsin for a private trial. This is on par with the 2006 FBI fabricated plot, Liberty City 7, where they were talking about blowing up government buildings, and the so-called terrorists were so stupid that they asked for terrorist uniforms to hold a parade. So
those poor guys. And our friend Margaret Griffiths at antiwar.com, she lives in Miami, and she says, Oh yeah, this Liberty City 7 plot against the Sears Tower is what it was. They're going to blow up the Sears Tower in Chicago. She goes, I got news for you. Here's the Sears Tower. And she published this on the antiwar.com blog. And it's a 3-story building. in
Oh,
Liberty
that's a
City in the
riot.
ghetto in Miami. And she's like, this is what we call the Sears Tower around here. That's what these guys were
Wow.
talking about. That's what they were entrapped into threatening. Meanwhile, every TV news station and the top of the New York Times says these guys were going to take down the Sears Tower in Chicago, you know?
Yeah, there was a PBS was it Frontline that actually did a superb investigation on how the FBI set up those poor guys
Only
and
15 years
outside.
too late, too. Good for them.
Yeah, well, yes, you're right.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that they did take a look at it. And a lot of those guys are still in prison. And we covered this on the show all along. There were great journalists who covered this all along. And like, there was the one poor guy who had left the group a year prior. And they went ahead and threw him in and indicted him anyway. Brought him back. You know what I mean? Just tried them all together. Just the whole thing was so unfair, dude. It's
Well,
completely ridiculous. Here's $20,000. Say you love Osama into the microphone, dummy. Okay, I love Osama. Gotcha. Okay, whatever. You know,
yeah,
those FBI agents belong in prison for that.
well, this is part of the reason why in my times I've talked to libertarians, I'm just saying, look, watch your mouth, watch your mouth.
Yeah,
You don't know who's going to be taping you. So
Yep. And in fact, because you could have real good guys who went to jail and now the feds are holding something over him. So he never was a cop before. He's a good guy, but now he's compromised and you don't know.
he's working off his
Never
plea
know.
bargain. He's got to bring in some scalps.
Exactly, man. So, and it's pretty easy to not threaten violence against people. Just don't do that. I don't know.
Yes, that's a real good standard.
Yeah. Hey, that thing you feel like saying, just say it another way. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
It's sort of like yes. I mean, it's it's a question of nouns and verbs.
That's right. This politician is making me very, very angry right now. Just say it like that. Call them a bathroom word, Something. I don't know. Hey, I have another question for you now about this judge in this courtroom and this whole farce of a proceeding here. How in the hell did these guys get acquitted by a federal jury, which is there to convict?
Well, they had some good lawyers, and there was one guy who chose to testify. He was warned about that, but he testified, and he apparently connected with the jury. There were four people on trial. Two of them were acquitted, and two of them the jury was hung. The feds are going to retry them, but unless the feds can exclude all the evidence next time, I don't think the feds are going to do that well. But there was enough evidence that kind of leaked into the case, and there were enough huge troubles with the FBI on this because, there was an orgy in Kalamazoo, and then there was a second FBI agent in this case who got sidelined because he set up a side hustle with a cybersecurity firm that he was running, and there was a third guy who had other legal issues, and it's like, so you have the whole first team of the FBI is kind of like, well, we can't hear anything from them. So it's just there are a lot of troubles.
Just on that, let me make sure I understand it, because this is an important point. We did talk with Ken about this before on the show. About you're telling me the prosecutor said to the judge, "Hey, judge, all of the federal cops who worked on this case, we don't want to call any of them to testify as prosecution witnesses. We're just gonna go with staff from the office to read off of documents or whatever it is." Because we wouldn't dare put these guys under oath in your courtroom. Is that basically what we're talking about here?
I think that's overstated. I don't think that the prosecutor said that about all the FBI agents, but three of the key ones were, vanished. So, and I think that the lawyers for the defendants were not allowed to say, well, yeah, the orgy in Kalamazoo, might have been fun, but as soon as he got home, he, beat up his wife. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't know if she enjoyed it. No, shut up.
Oh, God dang. I'm sure it wasn't that kind of party, Jim. I mean, until later. Sounds like.
Yeah. Yes. Anyhow, so going back to the high ground here.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's where we were this whole time up until just now.
Hell, I think I've caused enough troubles for you and Google.
Yeah, no, it's all right. No, listen, so, can you tell me anything about the kid that took the stand here? You say he was warned, man, you shouldn't do that, and he got up there, and what happened? Is there a narrative there you know of?
Uh, I would think that the Detroit News or Free Press would have covered it on a daily basis. It would probably have a good thing. Ken Bensinger might have had a good summary of his testimony. I was looking at other parts of this puzzle, so I didn't focus on that
Yeah,
guy's
that's fair.
testimony specifically. But from what I heard, it was effective with the jury. It's a hell of a thing to be sitting there on trial, and your entire life is hanging here by a thread, and you're watching the prosecutors block one move after another, which could put the truth, which could bring the truth into the case, and instead you're sitting there like some parody of yourself.
Hang on just one second. Hey, y'all, the audiobook of my book, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism, is finally done. Yes, of course, read by me. It's available at Audible, Amazon, Apple Books, and soon on Google Play and whatever other options there are out there. It's my history of America's war on terrorism from 1979 through today. Give it a listen and see if you agree. It's time to just come home. Enough already. Time to End the War on Terrorism. The audiobook. Hey guys, I've had a lot of great webmasters over the years, but the team at expanddesigns.com have by far been the most competent and reliable. Harley Abbott and his team have made great sites for the show and the Institute, and they keep them running well, suggesting and making improvements all along. Make a deal with expanddesigns.com for your new business or news site. They will take care of you. Use the promo code SCOTT and save $500. That's expanddesigns.com. Hey guys, Scott Horton here for Listen and Think Libertarian Audiobooks. As you may know, the audiobook of my new book, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism, is finally out. It's co-produced by our longtime friends at Listen and Think Libertarian Audiobooks. For many years now, Derek Sheriff over there at Listen and Think has offered lifetime subscriptions to anyone who donates $100 or more to The Scott Horton Show at scotthorton.org/donate, or to the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org/donate. And they've got a bunch of great titles, including Inside Syria by the late, great Reese Erlich. That's listenandthink.com. Yeah, I mean, I always wonder about that. People on trial who they're innocent and they got their lives in the hands of their lawyers, and who could tell your own story better than you, but then, of course, you're opening yourself up to cross-examination, and how are they going to spin it and that kind of thing. But it always seemed to me, for people who really didn't do it, more risky to let some other guy make your case for you, because he's going to miss something. You know what I mean? I guess depends on who you are and who your
Well,
lawyer is. But
yeah, it's a question of what your background is and what kind of things that the prosecutor might be able to pull into the courtroom as a result of you being on the witness stand. So,
yeah,
happily, I haven't had to make that decision myself so far.
yeah. I'll tell you what. My whole life, for whatever reason, I think from Saturday morning cartoons or whatever, just from the time I was so young, the idea of being falsely accused and falsely convicted, and just, you have your one chance in court, but for whatever reason, it ain't good enough, and off you go. Like, that's the worst fate. That's a fate worse than death. Go off to
Really?
prison for decades. You got one chance at being a human, and then you spend decades in a cage for some BS because of some job holder, In fact, I don't know, I've told this story before. I don't know if I ever told it to you, that I did walk in on an armed robbery, and I did end up testifying against that guy, although I didn't point my finger at him in court because I didn't get that good of a look at him. So I was not willing to swear that that's definitely the guy. I wasn't going to go, past, I'd never turned on a friend or whatever. I just walked in on the guy beating the old man with a club over the head, kind of a
Wow.
thing. But I have to say that the prosecutor, she was like, I don't know, 26 or something. I met her at Starbucks 2 days before. I told her, here's my story. And you know me, I tell stories pretty well. And I don't think I overdid it, like I was explaining the war in Yemen or whatever. You know what I mean? I just told, this is what happened. And then 2 days later, she's trying to examine me on direct, and I had to do all the storytelling for her. Like, she couldn't even set me up and ask the questions in the right order or anything. And even just set me up to even just say, this is what happened. I walked into the Quickie Mart. I passed by the guy and the guys behind the counter. I just assumed they were vendors or something, I don't know. Walked over there to the coffee, started getting my coffee, and then realized, oh, holy shit, this guy's beating that guy over the head. Oh, no. And then there's two of them and one of me. So I left and called the cops, and that's what I saw. And there's the video of that happening, just like I described it a second ago, and whatever. But essentially, she was completely incompetent, is my point. She couldn't even
Wow.
direct examine me about what I saw. And then I felt bad for the defense attorneys because they didn't really have anything to work with, because I wasn't embellishing my story beyond what was certainly right. And I was explaining
Sure.
myself perfectly well on what I did see. And so they didn't really have much to work with there. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, the prosecutor, I mean, hell, for all I know, Jim, they did get the wrong guy sitting there. You know what I mean? Like, at least I didn't point my finger at him, but maybe I helped convict the wrong guy. For all I know, they just found a black guy who was like in his early 20s. You know, I don't know. I can't trust him. That's the trial I participated in, and I have
Wow.
my own reasonable doubts.
Well, it's probably good you weren't in the jury.
I know. I guess I would have
It wasn't
acquitted the
good for
guy.
the prosecutor. It was good for the prosecutor that you were not in the jury. But yeah, it sounds. It sounded like you were very honest, but that wasn't maybe not what the prosecutor wanted. So
He did have a very unique car. It was a Chevy Beretta with the back window blown out. You know. Like,
yeah, back window blown out. That's unusual.
And there ain't too many Berettas around. You know what I mean? It's
Even
the
in
two-door
Texas.
Corsica. They don't really make many of those. Anyway.
Okay, well, it's a that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I've never. I don't think I've ever testified in a criminal case. So
Yeah. I mean, and I felt bad doing it because I'm on the side of the government here. But man, whoever it was, like damn near killed that old man. If I hadn't walked in, he probably would have killed him, because I'm sure, they split right after I did, kind of thing,
well, it's
It's a case for carrying a gun around with you wherever you go, I didn't have one.
Yep. Well, I mean, part of the the backstory in these kind of things is there are bad people out there. There are some very dangerous criminals who are very violent, and a case like this wrecks the government's credibility. I mean, because this is a problem the FBI has had in a number of court cases. Is people no longer trust FBI agents, especially when they're not willing to do a tape recording of their interviews or people's confessions. That was how the case in Florida with the Pulse nightclub massacre blew up. I did a story for USA Today on that. You had, the feds made this big deal of the widow of the guy that did the killings, and they were trying to say that she was complicit and that she knew all along. But but they hammered her for like I think 17 or 18 hours, and she didn't have a lawyer, and she finally signed this confession. And the FBI brought it to her federal trial, but it turned out it had all these false statements in the confession that just blew up their case. Mm-hmm. So.
And it also revealed a lot of things that they had lied about Omar Mateen, the perpetrator there.
Yes.
About how, he was mad because radical Islam makes you murder gay people. When in fact, that had nothing whatsoever to do with it at all. They were just the first Google result for nightclub in Orlando after he gave up on Disneyland, which he was attacking also not for their gayness, but just because he thought that would be Disney World. I mean, he thought also that would be, the most spectacular attack he could do. And he decided they just had too good a security, too many layers of security to get in there. So he Googled nightclub and went there. And as far as problems with his sexuality, this way or that, supposed problems, as the government had phrased it, she said there was none of that whatsoever. That was a complete hoax perpetrated by the government. And really, you know what? Not to belabor that point, but let's belabor it for a second. That was such a huge deal. This is a horrific massacre, and one, by the way, where the cops hid in cowardly terror outside like Columbine for hours while people were bleeding to death in there. And they even had cops who were brave enough, who were storming in there, and they were going to get this guy or die trying, and they were called back, and they gave up and left. They were inside the place, almost to the bathroom, and they were called back. And then the cops stayed outside for hours while people bled in there. It was this horrific massacre, this huge trauma, like akin to the Oklahoma bombing or some kind of thing like this. Completely just insane, kind of mini September 11th kind of a thing, really bad though. And it was all, the terrorist enemy hates gay people. So now you have, if anybody in America is soft on the terror war, it's the leftists, like to the left of the liberals, right? Where a lot of the homosexual, political lobby and whatever is really, you call them progressive or socialist or leftist more than just liberal, And then, so their kind of opposition to the terror war got completely neutralized right there. That, see, the enemy hates you for who you are. It's not just about those, office workers in New York or those generals at the Pentagon. It's you just for waking up in the morning. And that's whose side you need to be on now, is the American military side in this war. And that was just this huge, de facto psyop, if not like direct one there, in its effect that it had on the American political psyche at that time. It's terrible, and it was all pure lie.
Okay, but there is a huge detail that you're leaving out here, and that was the father of the shooter at the Pulse nightclub was a long-term FBI informant who may have helped protect his son, because his son was saying and doing all kinds of stuff that was putting him on the law enforcement radar. He was trouble. I mean, he's the kind of person that the police would have been justified in doing a lot more on before his mass killing. But his father was a long-term FBI informant, and that's something which came out in the trial.
Yep. And then remind me on the details of when the gun shop was real suspicious about this guy and refused to sell him a rifle and called the FBI and gave them his name and said, "What's the deal with this guy?" Right? Didn't something like that? You remember the details there?
There were all kinds of warning flags, but perhaps because of his father's connections, he was not treated like a typical private citizen would have been treated in a case like this. So
that's our security force for you right there.
And then there's a Las Vegas massacre, but that's too much. So,
well, I don't know enough about that. Why don't you tell me some things? I got to talk.
I don't know. FBI, what? So, how many people were shot? How many hundred people were shot? FBI claims that they do a thorough investigation for a long time, and then they come out with a 3-page summary. Nope, didn't find anything about motive. Didn't find anything, and people let the FBI get away with that. So,
that's incredible. Do you have an idea of what really went on there, or the best revisionist journalism about what may have gone on there, or anything?
Well, Scott, according to my inside sources, I don't know. But it's just, that's an awful lot of dead bodies, an awful lot of wounded folks, and to have no answers. I mean, it was the biggest terrorist attack since 9/11. So, and we really know almost nothing about it.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Well, back years ago when I first started doing this show, 19 years ago, right around then, I interviewed Frederick Whitehurst, who is
interesting.
the FBI whistleblower from the crime lab, who said that they manufactured evidence in the case of Waco and Oklahoma City. And I forgot, there was one more, but I'm not certain. And I interviewed him a few times, and I talked to him on the phone, too, a couple of times. And I remember him explaining to me that, the FBI, I'm putting words in his mouth here, this is not an exact quote, but to paraphrase essentially that it's a cult, right? That as a member of the FBI, it's like you're hazed into this fraternity kind of a thing where you have this like overriding, like almost religious sort of loyalty to the institution itself. And it's not to the United States of America, and it's not to the American people, it's to the Bureau. And the Bureau is job one, and protecting the Bureau is job one, and your role is as an agent of the Bureau and all of this thing. And it's almost like Scientology or whatever kind of deal, where it's just, it's such a thorough value system that it precludes all other values, kind of a way of putting it. You know what I mean? It's the only thing that matters. And so if that means they got to cover up the Oklahoma bombing, then they'll cover up the Oklahoma bombing. And, whatever it is, they don't give a damn. If it means preventing Donald Trump from getting reelected, they'll frame some guys for trying to kill the governor of Michigan. They'll go for it, And I guess there's not anyone even who works there who goes, "Wow, should we maybe not do this?" You know what I mean? Like they're all in. They go for it.
I don't know. My impression is that there are some FBI agents who have maintained a moral compass and have pushed back a little bit against some of these things, and maybe they've spoken out, but they certainly have not been welcomed on Capitol Hill. And it's been so politicized, and it's frustrating that there's so little investigation about the FBI's role in the last two, in the most recent two presidential elections, because that is the biggest thing that strikes me about this Michigan case is this, this whole kidnapping, Whitmer plot was a total crock from the start. And yet, folks are, it doesn't seem to be holding anybody's attention in Washington. There are real questions about what the FBI was doing to influence the 2020 election.
Yep.
And yet, crickets.
Yep. Just goes on. Well, that's why we're here, at least. And hey, good for you. You put this in Alexander Hamilton's New York Post. That gets a lot of eyeballs. It's not exactly the Washington Post, but it's better for some things. That's for sure,
Well, I was glad the editors liked the story, and it has some great artwork. It's the story in the printed paper is almost 2 full pages because it's got this great artwork that's like a full page.
Great.
They have great artists there and great editors.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Yeah, well, the art didn't make it into the online version, but it's still a very good and thorough one, and one for sharing with your friends and family here. Check it out. Inside the FBI's infiltration and entrapment of a Michigan militia crew by Jim Bovard at the New York Post. Thanks, Jim.
Hey, thanks a lot, Scott.
Oh, yeah.
The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA, APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.